episode 20 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slawinski.
And I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we are playing and or making games. Show notes. Thank you to all of you new listeners. We spiked in listeners. I have no idea what happened. Did you do something?
Did I? I often do things. I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago, the last game thing I did. Final game, maybe. I mean, it's awful. Like, apologies that I've forgotten the name of that show. Hey, I do things on and off. Yeah, weird. Okay, well, hello and welcome to all of you. I hope this lives up to your expectations.
Whatever you thinking was going to happen. Yes. Also, happy E3 to everyone out there. Yay! We'll get to that in a second. And then I noticed the spike in listeners because we had a deluge of reader mail. So I'm only going to hit a couple of those, but thank you to everyone who's sending those in. Keep them coming. Contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com. And Mike, what are you playing?
I've been playing WipEout Amiga. Let's call the whole thing off. The WipEout Amiga collection. It's really good. Is
this the final WipEout, or is it a collection of WipEouts? Why is it called?
As in the alpha and the. I don't know. It's essentially it's a HD packaged up 3 versions of the game. So it's 2048, HD, and Fury. It's good. It's good. I've always been a big fan of the aesthetic of WipEout, like the graphic design, the ship designs, all of that stuff. I love it. It's a very specific kind of turn of the millennium British graphic design style that only existed in the outside world for about 2 months, but just has kind of kept on going with the WipEout franchise, and I am mega nostalgic for that stuff.
Nerd out for a second. What do you mean? What do you mean a British design futuristic aesthetic that
you had a look which came about in kind of in the turn of the millennium. It was Designers Republic. The Designers Republic are the guys who did WipEout, but there were many imitators and there were many over time. It coincides. It was the introduction of Flash to web design, which meant that a lot of people started wanting to animate and have kind of cool graphics happening on websites. You know, those websites when they used to have like an intro animation that took an hour or whatever, right? But because of the limitations of the technology, you can only really kind of do like shapes and flat colors and these kind of things. And a bunch of graphic designers at the time kind of worked out how to make something that looked cool and futuristic with that style in mind. So yeah, and they got tapped by Psygnosis, who then became Sony Liverpool, and kind of that style finds its way into all the UI of WipEout and the kind of the advertising and logos and all this stuff. It's cool. It's a cool world that I like going back to. I think what I was most taken with this version is I feel like the game got a lot better. I feel like the handling, the kind of those racing mechanics, it feels really good.
Did they redo them? Because that typically
you wouldn't think you touch it. So no, I think
controls don't usually keep up with the generations.
Yeah, so I think it's frame rate. I think that's what it is, because I think both Fury and I want to say 2048 as well were Vita titles or PSP titles. I think 2048 was a PSP title. I'm probably wrong. But Fury was definitely a Vita or PSP version. You're going to look that up, aren't you, now while we talk? Which meant that those games were only running probably between 20 and 30 FPS on a handheld. And I think that's the big... And obviously also were running on, a miniature controller, miniature thumbstick, all this stuff. So I think it is just that jump up. I think it's more about the frame rate being 60. It seems to be mostly 60. It does dip down a little bit in this version. And also obviously having a DualShock to control it with. But it feels like they've just kind of dusted off those old games and made them feel a lot cleaner. The visuals are great. They've done a lot of work. Basically, it's one of those... I think I moaned a bit on the podcast a few weeks back about the Parappa the Rapper update being like the bare minimum they could get away with. This feels like some people who really cared and lovingly kind of recreated and recrafted that experience. Go on, tell me I'm wrong about the ports.
So, which ones are they? Pulse HD and 2048, you said?
2048, Fury, and HD. HD was a launch title, or not a launch title, but was a console that was PS3. Was HD. Wipeout HD was PS3, wasn't it?
I don't even see Fury on here. So there's...
Am I wrong? Is it Pure? It might be Pure. I thought it was called Fury.
So the last three in the series are Wipeout 2048, which was for the PlayStation Vita. There was Wipeout HD, which was the...
That's PS3,
that was PlayStation Network in 2008. So that would be PlayStation 3. And then there was Pulse, that was for the PSP in 2007. But before,
I could have sworn it was Fury on there, but
before Pulse, there's Pure, Fusion, Wipeout 3, Wipeout 64, Wipeout 2097, and the original Wipeout.
There's a crazy number of them. HD was interesting, actually, in that HD was the one where they definitely tried to move away from the old kind of visual style, all that Designer Republic stuff. Because I read an interview, actually, with some of the original kind of team members on the first Wipeout. And they're complaining in the article that it's really a shame that future developers haven't taken that style and updated it. You know, for them, Wipeout was always like a punk game. It was this fresh new look, and they wanted it to kind of keep being that. But it's actually now kind of retro nostalgia to kind of a start of the millennium kind of graphic design style, which is not what they intended. Which is interesting because Wipeout HD kind of did move away from that, and is therefore the one that I visually like the least.
You're right. It is Fury. Wipeout HD's expansion pack was called Fury.
That's what it is. Okay,
and coincidentally, building on one of our recent reader mails, received controversy over.
There you go. I've not come across that in this version, but yeah, it's nifty. I like it. It moves at a clip. I don't think they have probably changed much under the hood, but it feels a lot better, and I think that is especially with a game like Wipeout, the speed it's moving. Frame rate really does matter. We've not done the big frame rate debate on this show, but a game that moves at that pace, 60 FPS is a significantly better experience. And the controls are great. So yeah, I'm having a lovely time with it. It's very much becoming my kind of 20 minutes, throughout the day. I'll have a couple of rounds on Wipeout. When you're here, we play Infamous. When I'm on my own, I play Wipeout. That's working quite well for me. How about you? What are you playing?
So we haven't been playing Infamous. We've been playing Injustice.
I did that last time, didn't I, as well?
You totally did. It's baked in at this point. So I've been playing Injustice 2 a bit more.
You've been getting into the unlocks and the meta game in that, haven't you?
I did all the Wonder Woman movie stuff. They have, as part of the multiverse online component, which we talked about on the show last week, there was a whole Wonder Woman unlocking the movie outfit. The only issue was that no big deal getting the boots, the bustier, the bracers, and what do you call it? Her helmet signet. What's that called?
Tiara.
Yeah,
it's not a tiara, is it? That's too princessy. It's something. Yeah.
Yeah, Wonder Woman's tiara. Sure, let's go with it.
Yeah, it's called something else, like helm or something. I don't know.
But the last thing is her shield, and you have to have a level 20 character to do that, and I don't have that. So I didn't get her shield, so I missed.
So what you're saying is you failed.
I failed.
Yeah, that's a shame.
I need to get good at games.
You do.
But no, other than that, I still Injustice 2. There's if you're looking for a fighting game with plenty of content, there's your fighting game with plenty of content. You're gonna get the bang for your buck.
It's smart content though as well, and that's the thing that stood out to me is, as a developer, you look at it and it's actually not that much content, but what they do in terms of getting you to kind of, it's the same thing I think Hitman did very well. That kind of getting you to see every corner of the content rather than making loads and loads of content, just making sure that you actually experience everything. Seems to be their angle, which is clever, I think.
But yeah, I've been playing plenty of Injustice 2, and I need to spend that 100 quid to get a monitor so I can get back on my PC, because I've been itching to play some Civilization or something PC related soon. I mean, I'm meeting a bunch of devs here in London, and I know like their games are on Steam, and I keep being like, I should really go back and play their games again just so I can have a proper conversation, and just haven't had the chance yet. So yeah, there's my secret.
You know what you should do? You should go on Twitter and ask people to recommend you a monitor, and then destroy your Twitter account for 3 days. That's what you should do.
Now it's time for what's going on at the studio, and what's going on at the studio is E3. E3 is currently going on. We will do the full sort of recap next week, because as we record this, the day before this podcast goes live, the only one due to time zones that the only company that has had their press conference due to time zones so far has been EA.
That's right.
And some interesting themes popping out of EA's press conference this year. But let's hit some of the games first. There was a Star Wars Battlefront 2, had a 30-minute multiplayer. So I like that you even said this on Twitter. You were watching the press conference, and then you had an epiphany, so you went off and did something else, and then came back and the show was over.
Well, I didn't go away. I had it on. It was just playing in the background, and I just missed the end. Usually with an E3 press conference, you have like and one more thing, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to announce that game, Skate 4 or whatever, like
which a lot of people were hoping for.
But like you expect a triumphant end, and it feels like it just kind of petered out, and kind of they did the Star Wars thing, and then just everyone kind of coughed and went home. Yeah,
like they had 60 minutes of stuff, and then suddenly they're like, and YouTubers, take it away. And they just had some multiplayer streaming for 30 minutes of a press conference. Which I don't know. We'll see how that...
It speaks to the times, doesn't
it? It really does. We'll loop back to that. Then there was Need for Speed Payback, which cool.
It's fun to see it becoming more and more Fast and Furious. You're not a Fast and Furious guy, are you?
No, I mean, hold on. I should roll that back. I am. I believe I would be if I actually watched all the movies. I am.
You should get into it at some point. Rainy weekend, you should absolutely.
And that is my understanding. Like I am old enough to have watched the first one in the theater.
Yeah.
And when I say old enough, I mean like because the first one was like 20 years ago now or something like that.
It was hackers for people who like cars, and it's gone more and more off the rails since. Like
they stole VCRs. I remember this. Like now
they're stopping nuclear war. Like it's just gone. It's escalated in a way that is a lot of fun. Like
so is it like XXX now? Like the other Vin Diesel vehicle? Pitch Black was the other Vin Diesel vehicle.
It's gone so far through now that it's almost James Bond. Like it's gone so ridiculous. It's like if someone made like James Bond meets the Avengers at this point. It's ridiculous, but there are lots of fun. Haven't seen the newest one, but it's funny that like the voice acting and the kind of the tone that was in there. I don't think anyone said family 70 times during the trailer, but there was definitely that sense of the kind of that Fast and Furious kind of tone, which makes a lot of sense. If you're making a game of that theme nowadays, then you do kind of have to rip off Fast and Furious. I think it's the fantasy people want.
Yeah, BioWare announced its new IP called Anthem.
Right? Yeah. That's a great title. It's got that Halo, Destiny.
Destiny. I was about to say, it's almost like it's got a destiny to it.
It says there's an epicness to it. I'm looking forward to it. It is the Mass Effect team, isn't it? It's what they were working on when the other team was working on Andromeda.
Mm-hmm. And then from our side of the camp. There was an independent title of what happens when a good independent team gets just a cash injection.
We're talking, of course, of Brothers Prison Break, right?
Correct. So the developers of Brothers, which if you've never played it, please go.
It's a great game.
Do that. But they have a new title called A Way Out, which is a co-op co-op single player game. That sounds really weird. A co-op campaign game.
It's almost Kane and Lynchian, one could say.
Ugh.
But it is, right? It's that idea again. It's an interesting one, and I think they're going to. I think tonally what they're doing with it, whereas Kane and Lynch was like, let's make a Michael Mann movie 20 years after Michael Mann was kind of relevant in the action space, they're actually going, no, let's make a HBO drama you can play along with each other with. And there's something to it. Like, it definitely, especially I suspect they're going to go for that kind of 3 or 4 hour duration. Maybe it's a downloadable game, maybe it's a lower budget box release. I think it works. I think it's smart. I think it's really smart. I'm intrigued to see where it goes. I get the impression as well that it's probably not mainly set in the prison. It's probably more about the world outside. But it's interesting. And what I like about it as well is it very much plays into the strengths of the team. The guys who made Brothers, people think that was just, 2 kids that came out of nowhere. These were guys who were working in AAA. They were doing these bigger budget games. So taking that team with its kind of sensibilities it has and giving them the resources to make something that pushes back towards AAA, that's smart. I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it just really, it's to allow I mean, if you're going to have a co-op campaign, an independent team's probably going to be the one that sort of does that. I mean, they kind of touched upon it with what was it, Dead Space 3? And
they tried, didn't they, with where you could see different things and stuff. So but no one ever noticed the differences. So because anyone who's picking up Dead Space was picking it up for a solo thriller. Like they were looking for that, Dead Space 1 to Dead Space 2. And this is a game you have to sell as co-op in order to get people on board with what it is. I think if it were a single player game with the same idea, I don't think it would be anywhere near as interesting. Yeah. Battlefield 1 maps, some are set at night. There's going to be Russian murder lady soldiers. Was that the official name? Lady Russian murderers. Russian murdered lady soldiers. I assume like it was a real kind of battalion, right? It's a historically based thing. That's cool. Sure. And then there were like 3 different sports games. Madden NFL 18 got something called Long Shot now, a story mode. It's basically Madden RPG. I'm intrigued by this because they tried this with FIFA first, and now clearly, and you see the new FIFA is being very much sold on the back of that character. Well, I can't remember the name of the character, but they had a lot of very expensive cameos of like famous footballers, like saying, "Oh, I can't." It's something like Alex Ryder or something, isn't it? Like, "Oh, no one can live up to Alex Ryder's skill set," or something like that. Alex Hunter, that's it. The most focus tested name in video game history, I imagine. Yeah. And that's not a real guy, is it? There's no real footballer. This is the wrong we're the wrong podcast to approach that question. Derek Footy. Derek Footy, but it clearly worked, right? The new FIFA is selling itself based on this storyline. People are bought into it, and the NFL thing, clearly they're kind of rolling that idea in. So it is interesting, like something. They've got some data. EA don't do things like this because it's, interesting. They do it because they've got some analytics that say that people really engage with the story, which is fascinating to see story coming into sports games. And then NBA Live 18, like it just felt like every sports game now has an RPG element to it that's gonna keep people engaged in retention in it, for a while. So yeah, now to the presentation of things overall during that. First out, shout out to Janina Gavankar, who, if you're a fan of the league, was Shiva Kamini Soma Kantakram. And yeah, she was an icon on the show. Okay. And she is the Imperial she's like the Imperial commander in Battlefront 2. Yeah, she came on and introed that. And she did a great job. It was very much the Aisha Tyler sort of Ubisoftian presentation, where she
she was having a good time. Like, you know, she did her presentation. She definitely did her job. It felt good. It didn't feel forced, unlike the rest of that show. Boy.
It oscillated between incredibly forced and like massively underprepared. I found it quite charming. The one that was amazing was there was one YouTuber I remember who really fluffed his
He froze up.
He froze up. He was terrified. And you know what? I can relate. You know, I was on stage in the Sony press conference a few years back, and it is the most terrifying thing I've ever done. But that's why you spend 2 days practicing and practicing and practicing so that you're on autopilot, even though you are. I'm sure people will be able to go and find the video of me doing it, and I am shaking, like I am terrified. But you get through it. But I saw a lot of snark aimed at that guy, and if you've not done it, then don't take the piss. That's my view on that one.
Hey guys, it's your boy Mikey B, right here at the EA press conference. Like and subscribe.
It's very scary knowing millions of people are watching you at that moment.
Millions of people are watching these people all the time. Like, come on, like this is.
It's different. It's different. It's a different skill set. It's a different skill set.
Okay.
All right.
But yes, a huge portion of the EA press conference, and we will. It'll be curious to see if this goes throughout the entire show. Was influencers?
Yeah, YouTubers are very well. YouTubers, streamers, esports.
And the question is, does it fit a press conference format? And who are these? Are these press conferences anymore, or are they much more like the Nintendo Directian straight to consumer kind of presentation? Which still
they are no doubt direct to consumer.
They are, but I don't know if the consumer wants. This is where the debate sort of comes in, because yes, consumers obviously are into influencers and want to, these folks have thousands of followers, hundreds of thousands of followers.
Millions, yeah.
I don't know if anyone they put on stage is millions.
Oh no, there was. I mean, the fact that I recognize some of their names means that some of them were.
Oh, did you?
Oh, the woman who was hosting, was it the Battlefront demo? It was iJustine, and iJustine I've heard of. That was the name that I'd heard of. So she must be multi-millions if I've heard of her. Because I mean, we are two old men who don't know.
Right. And
don't know the culture. I would suspect anyone who was talking at that press conference was in the millions.
So and that's kind of the question is, even if it is going straight to consumer, and if we're looking at, so if you pull the ESA data and you look at who's purchasing games, right? Like forget who's the sort of view. If you're looking at who's purchasing games, yes, it skews a bit older, into the 30s. Now, if that is someone who's watching an E3 press conference, then none of this resonates with them. I mean,
I think they aren't. I think the people who are watching an EA press conference at E3, they're kids. When I think about my viewing of it, until I obviously now I have to watch it every year because I work in the industry, but my peak interest in these things was around kind of 15, 16, 17. And if I was 15, 16, 17 right now, then half the people in that show would have been people I love. I'm imagining a version of E3, and they've done this a few years. They've tried this with more conventional celebrities. If you told me that, Sony's E3 press conference is going to be hosted by Kimmy Schmidt, the actress who plays Kimmy Schmidt off Kimmy Schmidt, Chris Hardwick, Chris Pratt, the kinds of acts and, comedy actors who are targeted at my age group. I think that was the coolest thing ever, and I'd be like, yeah, totally. I'm going to watch it just for Tina Fey's going to introduce the new Halo. Yeah, sure, I'll watch that. It is. I think there is a generational thing that we're just blind to, frankly, here.
I don't know,
but I'm interested to see because I've not looked at what the feedback is. I've not looked at what the comments are from that age group. Do they want to see these people in this context, or would they rather those people shut up and they could watch the trailers? Which is how, as an older person, I felt like, well, I don't care about this personality, just show me some good content, show me the trailers, show me what the game is.
I don't know. I for me, there is a level of earned respect. Like I like something like DICE, right? Like the DICE Awards, where Greg Miller and Jessica Chobot did a fantastic job. And in all honesty, I've been attending those awards for over a decade now, and it was really one of the first sort of times the people hosting the show, yes, those are the people who should be hosting that show. Like they
should be, but Miller and Chobot are just iJustine and all these YouTubers and streamers for our generation. That's what I'm saying, is like, what is Greg Miller if not the YouTuber targeted at this slightly older audience? And that's that he has a younger audience as well, obviously, but like, he is certainly of a different generation to these younger people. And I'm sure, again, like, this is my thing with EA, like, it's the same thing I said about the storytelling in the sports games. Like, they don't make decisions on a whim. Like, they have some data, they have some numbers. They will have chosen every single streamer there to hit certain demographics, I guarantee it.
Oh, no, I can't snark on it and say it's stupid. Like, of course not. I mean, just looking at EA's stock price, like, who am I to judge right now? By the way, if you don't pay attention to stocks, EA is doing very, very well these past few years, along with Activision. But that that's why I'm not just like pooping on this. But it is weird, and I don't know if I like it. And that's kind of where I am on. I appreciated the section with Janina for Battlefront. I like it. I liked when the developer came on stage. I mean, maybe that's why one of the other reasons. That's
something I miss.
Maybe that's why it sort of bothered me, was because at the end, oh wow, I still remember the previous EA CEO's name. I want to say the new one is Andrew. Previous one was John R. But coming up on stage at the end and being like, I want to thank all of our Rockstar developers, who are making these games. And it's kind of like, yeah, they're such rock stars, you didn't put them on stage. The only one you put on stage was the one indie that you're third party funding. But I didn't see Aaron from BioWare up there. I didn't see...
That is weird, right? Like, the lack of people in t-shirts and jeans talking excitedly and slightly uncomfortably about what they made. That's definitely something that wasn't present at EA. But to be fair, EA always has slanted away from that, right? Like, I would expect more of that at the rest of the press conferences we're about to see.
Yeah...
If I'm wrong, that's going to be interesting, and anyone listening to this knows if I'm wrong or not.
Yeah, no. Oh yeah, I completely forgot. There was the whole entire thing where the two older dudes, and that's really unfair because they're just older compared to everyone else they put on that stage. Were the two soccer guys or the two football guys for FIFA?
Yeah, I'm figuring they must be a big deal.
I guess.
I'm not a sports guy. They've got to be like, are they like pundits on TV or something?
I don't know. It felt like when, they put the Top Gear guys into something, and I'm like, sure, fine. I don't know. Guy in a helmet crashes. Yeah. I don't know. I don't understand any of this. But that's fine. So yeah, it'll be interesting, and obviously by the time people listen to this episode, they'll know if putting streamers through every single press conference became a theme of this year, and whether it resonated well with the audience. But this is certainly a newer-ish phenomenon, and we've seen a couple. There are rando examples. For example, last year during the Pirates, during the Xbox presentation of the Pirates game, they used a bunch of streamers, and I don't remember that going over.
So this is my question. This is my next question, the going over well thing. I'm interested. I'm going to have to chat to some people who are in the room, because this is obviously the last couple of E3s. Me and you have both been present. We've been in the audience for these shows. And it's a very different experience in the room to what you see on when you're streaming and watching. You know, it's the same as going to a concert or going to the theatre. Like, there's an emotional sense in the room, kind of a shared reaction to everything, which is fascinating. And yeah, I remember the Pirates thing not going across incredibly well in the room last year at the Xbox Talk, but I do remember that being a video that I saw bouncing around all over the internet and people really enjoying at the world at large. I think that might have something to do with the age of the average person in the room at a press conference, unfortunately. So yeah, I'd love to have been in the room last night and seen how, different time zones yesterday morning or whenever it was in America, but like seen how that approach went down to a room full of games journalists. I'm guessing maybe not as well as I suspect it went over on Twitch.
Yeah, the only other thing, I don't know if you had stopped paying attention by this point, but for Battlefront 2, the game changers, is that what they called them?
They did. Which was the ambiguous, are they playtesters? Are they influencers? Well, are they? Because I got the impression they might be like people that like are known. Like they're like really like famous streamers of. I felt that they were maybe like Battlefront fans who are big streamers who are experts in the game. It was a weird confluence of playtesting and influencer stuff. And I have a whole raft of views on whether you should do playtesting should be anonymized and private and secret, not filmed and put on stage, but that's a different thing. It was a really weird, I couldn't work out if that was actually a useful part of the development process or whether that was a big PR stunt. My suspicion is it's the latter. More power to them if they can afford to do fake playtesting. That's great.
I mean, it was always great manipulation of the press whenever they would invite the sort of reviewers from major outlets to come, like, play the game and give us your feedback, and then of course it made that person feel more attached to the product so that they would.
Well, to be clear, playtesting is very important. I'm not knocking playtesting.
No.
It's when you kind of conflate it with marketing that it becomes a bit confusing.
Right. And of course that, given the era of influencers, it's even more confusing because
there's some gray areas there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is no awkward, there isn't that internal struggle like there was in the press where it was just like, hey, you went to go play this game and gave feedback and blah, blah, blah. You probably shouldn't be talking about, there was the internal battle going on.
You wouldn't have had, or maybe you did. Did you have Gersman on stage at the PlayStation event talking about the exciting new Ratchet and Clank? I didn't think so, right?
No.
There was more of a separation of church and state than there is now.
Yeah, there was. There was a separation, and every time, that separation was kind of broken, there was sort of, I don't know if the public ever saw this, but behind the scenes, yes, there was an awkward conversation that came up between outlets where it was just like, hey, why are you thanked in the Dead or Alive beach volleyball game? Like, what is going on there? And it's just like, oh yeah, they flew me out to Japan and blah, blah, blah. And you did the review. Like, do you think that's okay? And, that's a question that would even be asked back in the day. Now, nah, brah, it's totally cool. Like, I'm
like and subscribe.
I got thanked. I got $30,000 for it. Got a free trip. And it was great. Thanks. But yeah, no, it's interesting times. So I'm curious to. What are you laughing about?
Because this has just gone massively off the rails. This is good.
No, we'll see.
This has been two old men moaning about the state of the games industry with Alexander Slowinski and Mike Bithell.
1, 2, 3. I want to thank you for the freedom mail again. Thank you for the freedom mail again.
Dear Alexander, parenthetical, and I guess Mike when you read this to him. The other day, Mike tweeted about how people should value the work they do and not to let corporations take advantage of them. And with that in mind, what is y'all's opinion on, quote, non-compete clauses and the whole practice of companies owning the work you do outside of the office? I know Mike has talked about how if he hadn't gotten the rights for Thomas Was Alone, that game wouldn't have been created. And I've seen other devs I admire give up on projects completely because of the contracts with current employers, or take long breaks from games to work on contract work. I'm currently a student learning game development, and if I choose to work at a AAA game studio to pay off debt, I won't be able to work on the small games I like to make at home and for that time period, which makes no sense because to me, companies should encourage their employees to work on their skills outside of work because, simply put, the more time you spend, the better you will be at it. Some of the reasons why I think it's a common practice is that employers don't want their employees coming into work drained and working on their side projects the previous night. But if I spend maybe an hour or two a day working on a side project for fun over the course of 2 years and make a small, very small game, and I did everything my employers wanted, I should be able to release that game and maybe make some money off my work. I'm probably missing something since this is common practice for employers, but if you could shed some light on it, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks for everything you guys do. This podcast has helped me realize that there is a lot behind the scenes stuff in games that I need to be aware of. Smiley face from your fellow socialist across the pond, Zach.
Hello, comrade. I'm gonna regret that. Yeah, it's a big discussion. It's a big discussion, and has been for, I mean, at least the 10 years I've been working in games. I'm sure it will always be.
It's gonna keep being a thing.
It'll always rage on. So I guess the very first kind of high level rule is, if you don't like something in a contract, don't sign the contract. There are of course unethical contracts, but if an employer is making a statement to you that no, we want to claim ownership of this stuff, we will make it difficult for you to release another game while you're working with us, then you have a choice. You can choose to walk away from that, and I understand that the jobs are important, and maybe you don't feel you can walk away from it, but you can. And contractually, the first thing to say is read your contract and make sure you're happy with anything in it. That's aside, there are interesting questions on either side of this, and as someone who has been involved in getting around one of these, I do have some views on both sides of it. And I think both sides, there are pros and cons. I think there is. I don't think it's necessarily a nasty thing. I don't think it's an unfair thing. So yes, a lot of game companies have this rule that even if you're working outside of office hours, even if you're working on your own equipment, any intellectual creation you have belongs to them. There's one reason mainly, and it's not the burnout thing, by the way, because if it was a burnout thing, it wouldn't be the intellectual property they were claiming ownership. They would be banning you from working on stuff outside of work hours. I don't know the legal framework by which they do that, and arguably there isn't much of an intellectual framework for the intellectual point, but they would not be doing that. The reason they're doing this is because you come up with ideas for your job throughout the day. You might wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night. Oh my god, we need to add a double jump to the game. As an employee, as a creative employee, and I'm sure everyone listening to this who's a designer or who's a creative person, that your ideas do not necessarily hit your brain between the hours of 9 and 5. That you can Don Draper a problem where you'll be trying all day to think of something, you'll get home, you'll feed your cat, and immediately the idea will spring into your head fully formed. And that's what the companies are worried about, is that basically they paid you for that idea. You used up office time trying to come up with an answer to that problem, and then you have that idea outside of work hours. That's a problem for them. Also, it's very hard to prove when an idea came into your head. If you're working at work on a first-person shooter, and in the middle of the night you wake up with the idea for Overwatch in your head 10 years ago, is it fair that you could go and make that game on your own, or should it belong to the company you work at because they're the ones kind of paying you and triggering off the thinking and thought processes there? It's a tough one, and it's one that, in my case, yes, I basically got an exemption from it. I then actually had the option, when I left Blitz, which was the company I came up with Thomas Was Alone when I was at, and they gave me the ownership of the rights. When I was choosing my next job, I specifically turned down jobs on platforming games because I knew that there would be a conflict of interest there, that something I was working on in my own time would be kind of conflicting with what was being done at work. And I also found a company who were willing to put a clause into my contract that exempted Thomas Was Alone from their own, assertion of ownership of stuff. I don't think it's evil. I think it's just something to be aware of. The other key thing before I let Alexander say some stuff is it's not a rule against you making stuff. It's a rule against you owning stuff. If you are passionately wanting to make stuff in your own time and get better and learn your skills, don't make that game that's been in your head since you were 12 and that you think is going to make you a millionaire one day. Don't do that one. But if you want to be making little games and experimenting, your company is not going to try and take your game away. Blitz didn't want to make Thomas Was Alone. They couldn't care less about Thomas Was Alone, which was why when I asked about it, they gave me the ownership. You can still make stuff in your own time as long as you're turning up to work and you're not tired. They will be fine with that. And if at any point during the process you think, well, actually, this is something that maybe I want to release, I want to sell, you can go and talk to your employer at that point. You're not in as strong a position as if you'd negotiated at the point where you started employment, but you can get out of things, and you can discuss. Alexander, take it away.
So there's a term called asking for forgiveness rather than permission. And
I heard a story about you and this phrase from my girlfriend earlier. Carry on.
But yeah, so in many cases, it makes sense for you to go ahead and just do something. And then, if you get caught, just ask for forgiveness because you're never going to get permission to do it. This is not the time to do.
Oh, thank God you went there, because I was sitting.
No.
People who can't see my webcam, I was sitting here going, no.
No. This is
not one of those situations.
This is definitely not one of those situations. There's a few layers here. One, if you work for, and as you said, you chose to work at a AAA game studio. So let's assume that they, are potentially owned by a larger corporation or something along those lines. Their lawyers beat your lawyers 9 times out of 10. So
just through numbers, and the amount they can spend.
Yeah, that's law. Law is about spending. And sorry,
that's a different podcast, but yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that. But if in that situation, you should really be asking for permission, if you are working for any type of major corporation or major company and you don't know what the rules are. Now, let's take it down to something our scale. As the person, who had to do the non-compete clause, for our company, there is flexibility in there. There is very much the case of when you are going to a studio of a certain size, or even of a massive studio, I guess, feel free to ask HR or whoever's hiring you, what is their policy on work outside of the office? Because that is something you should be incredibly aware of. If you are looking to work on these side projects, our policy, which I won't detail here, is incredibly flexible.
We're not trying to screw anyone out of their idea. We just want to protect certain parts of our proprietary stuff. Yeah.
No, it is incredibly flexible, and it is, if
and we have multiple people working at the company who are working on other games with other people as well, or they're working on their own stuff in their spare time. We're.
But yes, we have an incredibly flexible policy. So in terms of what is our opinion on non-compete clauses, or it's not really non-competes, it's intellectual property, is what we're really sort of talking about here. There is a portion of this where we have to own stuff that is being made, on through company contracts on company time. That is a safety mechanism that we have to have in place. But have that conversation when you are looking at other jobs, when you're starting to take on work from other people. What are their policies? What are their rules? Because this is a battleground. It is.
It is, and different companies are trying to be competitive with each other. I think it's something to bear in mind. Something when you're a student, your only concern is I have to get a job. And maybe that will be the case for you when you finish university. Just get the first job you can get and get started on that ladder. And maybe you don't make your own projects for the couple of years where you're accruing the experience of the first job. But at the point where you are starting to choose between jobs, the same way you're choosing, like, do I like the city this company is based in? Do I think that there's enough nice lunch places near the office? That matters very much to me, probably too much. At the same time, you can definitely be asking, as Alexander says, HR, what's the clause they have, and how flexible are they in changing that for your purposes? Because a lot of, maybe not the big AAA companies, but a lot of the mid-sized companies know this is something that young, talented people want. Because frankly, as someone, as you point out in the email, like, they should want you to be doing, you should love games enough that you're wanting to do this in your spare time and you're wanting to train yourself up. And a lot of the kind of middle scale studios are doing what we're doing and kind of trying to be flexible with that. So let that play a role in the decision. You are able to choose where you want to work. Maybe not with a first job, but down the road, you're going to be able to make those choices.
And ask for permission rather than forgiveness. Ask for permission.
Yes. Because I didn't. So complete transparency, and Blitz doesn't exist anymore, so I assume I can talk very transparently about them. The conversation when I made a game and I released it initially as a Flash game on Congregate for free, the conversation on Monday when I got back into the office that was happening behind closed doors was not how can we best utilize this new IP Mike's generated, it's how can we fire Mike as easily as possible. I was very lucky to still have a job the next day, and it's only because there were certain people in the company who stood up for me and kind of didn't want to get rid of me. Basically, I was at that point valuable to a couple of projects, and I managed to stay on board. So that was definitely a risky play, and yeah, it could have gone the other way very, very easily.
Hi, Alexander, and square bracket,
I do like rectangles,
curve bracket, and swirly bracket. Mike, I guess. I like this. I
feel like you're editing these, Alexander.
No, I'm really not. This is getting great. Firstly, just wanted to thank you for the podcast, along with sharing your insights and lessons from the industry. For any devs I know looking for new podcasts to listen to, I point them your way. I think as the industry evolves into the future, it's more important now more than ever that consumers should be aware of how things are made, even though it may not be glamorous or pretty.
How dare you? We're both those things. I'm pretty and Alexander's glamorous. That's how it works.
Bam. My question is about what are the considerations and factors one should think about when looking to develop for a platform, PC, console, mobile. For instance, you went from PC to PS4 to PSVR and then to Google Daydream, which is quite the variety. I know on the past podcasts you've raised the fact that console development has certain costs associated with it and can tend to be more expensive than one initially anticipates. I appreciate how this is a loaded question, but I'm sure there are certain considerations one has to make from a development standpoint before going ahead. Keep up the great podcast. Regards, McDougal. I'm never sure if it's McDougal or McDougle. But
it's definitely McDougal.
It's McDougal. He follows us on Twitter.
Unless it's a French-Scottish person. That's McDougal.
McDougal. Let's go ahead with I'll take a first crack at this one.
Yeah, no, go for it. Yeah, this is very much your wheelhouse.
Basically, the core question here is, what are the considerations and factors one should think about when looking to develop for a platform? I'm going to toss out localization as one of the big ones. That's a cost not a lot of folks think about, but is necessary as part of putting your title on the consoles. You've certainly the store data. Metadata is one of those things that no one really talks about, but has to be done as part of the process. And that store data requires localization in, I'm going to say, about a dozen languages. And so that is one of those things you're going to want a localization team for, which on PC you don't necessarily need to worry about. I mean, like Thomas is still just English. And
is it really on PC? We really should do something about that at some point.
I would really like to.
I've not opened the Thomas Was Alone source code for about 5 years, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah. But yes, I would certainly like to revisit that, especially given, how it's done and get it. But, that's a project. That's a whole other conversation for a whole other show.
Sure.
But yes, localization is really one of those things that is an additional cost that no one really thinks about until they're too deep in. But Mike, go ahead with the dev kits and that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's one that people often overlook. I think it's weird. There are ways of using an Xbox One, like a retail Xbox One, as a dev kit, but it doesn't give you access to every kind of nook and cranny of what's possible there. But yeah, you're going to need a console dev kit. Those are incredibly expensive. If you want to buy one from the platform, they're usually in the kind of £2,000, maybe £3,000 range, sometimes higher. Now, most people honestly don't do that. Most of us get given them, and we get given them by doing all that boring networking, getting to know people stuff.
But in very many cases, an independent developer or someone like that doesn't have the bandwidth to learn all the things that need to be done on the console platforms. That's
true. And a couple platforms as well are easier to get hold of than others. So Xbox One, for example, if you join the Idea Xbox program, you get sent one. Like, it's that simple. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, but there is a lot of, as Alexander says, bandwidth that is required, time and energy to try and get, just to physically get the piece of machinery that you need to make a game. After that, there is then obviously the porting process. Porting's an interesting one because people always think about the very obvious thing of like, well, getting your game running on the platform. That usually only takes a day or two. That's not that hard. To get your Unity, if you're making a game in Unity or Unreal, that's the easy bit. Getting your game running is great. What's actually the challenging stuff is the API stuff. So kind of trophies, achievements, leaderboards, multiplayer, getting your icons the right size, making sure that the controller feels good, all the stuff that actually makes your game good rather than functional. That's the stuff that takes a long time.
This is the stuff that I call the it's not hard stuff. It's a trap that I've seen more than a few people fall into. Where it's, you have to do this and this and this. Well, it's not hard. Yeah, it's not hard, but it takes time.
But if it only takes an hour, there's still 100 of those things to do, so you need to make your time available. On top of that, there's often a lot of challenges in terms of getting people to purchase stuff on consoles. For example, if I want to sell a game on Steam, I put it on Steam. Through Steam Direct is how you do that. Or if you're already a developer, you obviously don't need to go through that process. And I can just put a link on my Twitter, and I can be relatively comfortable that will drive traffic towards the page, and that will hopefully lead to some sales. Whereas with console, it's weird kind of enclosed system. You're at the whim of often what those sales platforms are, and Steam is the same in this way, but you can at least see what's going on with Steam. Whereas often you can find that your game, we've certainly had it where you and I have been looking at our sales numbers, and we've seen this enormous spike. And it's literally taken us 3 or 4 hours to work out why. Like, what happened. And it'll be that, Thomas Was Alone happened to be on the front page of the Xbox store for a couple of hours. And that's what caused a big spike in our sales. But it does take a while to work out what these things are. And that's kind of indicative of there are challenges there. And the rules keep changing. And there's no experts in any of it. So it is a lot. It is a lot, and there's something to be said for the simplicity of just releasing a game on PC or on Android or on iOS. Those are much easier, lower friction processes. But obviously, they carry their own limitations in terms of you won't be perceived necessarily as being a quote-unquote real game because, anyone can get on Steam now. So you don't have that same edge that you get if Sony are backing you. That kind of thing is the payoff. That's why we bother. And Likewise, I think often as gamers, as like hardcore gamers and game devs, we assume, because I look around my room and I have every games console and a good PC and a good Mac, I assume that's how everyone is. That reality is not, that's not how it is. Thomas Was Alone, every time we launch it on a different platform, we find a new audience. And the number of, like, if you type in new game Thomas Was Alone into Twitter as a search term, you will find people from 2 months ago saying, oh, I played this new game Thomas Was Alone. And the games get to have kind of a life of their own and kind of be a bit evergreen because they're being released on multiple platforms that with players who've never heard of them before. So there are benefits, but it's a big undertaking. And my advice often to devs is, if it's your first game, maybe just go for one of those low friction platforms first and find out like if the game works, find out if their audience is connecting with it, and obviously then hopefully make some money with it that you can invest into doing the kind of the console ports. Thomas Was Alone, that's how we did it. Thomas Was Alone came out on PC and just started doing well enough that we could afford to do Vita and PS4, and then just started doing well enough on there that we thought, you know what, let's take a punt and try and get it on Xbox, and slowly but surely you build up as things go well. The other thing, of course, is if your game's doing well, the platform holders may come to you. There's lots of porting houses, there's lots of people who can take a game away from you and just get it done for you. That introduces a whole heap of new, interesting challenges. But, you know, my feeling would be that going multi-platform with your first game is an enormous undertaking, and I'm not entirely convinced that it's worth it for new devs. What do you reckon?
I would wave someone off. I mean, if trying to just understand and take the couple punches to the face that you're going to take, you know, just on one platform, whether that's, you know, even something that is generally frictionless, like, you know, PC or mobile, every it
will go wrong in myriad interesting ways.
Like things are going to go wrong.
Volume launched without a trailer on Steam. We did everything we could. We have a great relationship with Valve, and they were checking the page before it launched to help us and make sure that everything was right. And we all missed it. And Volume didn't have a trailer on its page for about 6 hours when the game launched. Yeah. It can happen in a situation where you literally have someone at Valve who's checking the page. It can still go wrong.
Yeah. So I mean, you're going to get punched in the face even if you're just launching on one platform. So it gets exponential the more platforms you're trying to launch on at once, which is why, you know, when I see something like a crowdfunded game where they start talking about like, yeah, we're going to launch, you know, like they get their goal and they put in their stretch goals, and then for the stretch goals it says
for an extra $5,000 we'll port it to this
right
platform.
For an extra $5,000, which is just, and
that's
wrong.
Not going to cover that's not going to cover the certification. That's something else we didn't mention, is certification. If you're launching on mobile or PC, you can basically say, yeah, this is a game for people who are 12 years or up, and that's fine. The second you are launching on a console, even if it's digital only, you have to actually go through the BBFC, PEGI, ESRB. BBFC actually you don't have to do you? It's just USK, ESRB and PEGI.
It's PEGI, but now, this is a whole other set of costs. The rating board.
And that costs thousands. Well, and that's not cheap.
No, it is not.
People tend to assume it's very cheap.
It is not cheap. And again, if you make the terrible mistake, and please keep this in mind if you're a younger dev, and you're going to do any type of crowdfunding or something like that, if you make a retail product, not a digitally distributed game, there is the costs on ratings those games is completely different than it is for a digitally distributed product. And that will be in the tens of thousands. So, you know, just
ask someone.
Yeah, just be aware of that. But to go back to the whole entire stretch goal thing, you know, even in some cases, it's even like folks that have actually, here's where it gets sort of complicated. Some of these folks have absolutely come from AAA backgrounds and know how to produce a game, and they will finish that game. There's no doubt that they're going to finish that game. However, they were not on the team that had to deal with the metadata and the ratings boards and all of these other things, which is a completely different if you're in AAA.
Which I can relate to because I wasn't, and I always assume those things just happen.
And they don't just happen.
They really don't, no.
So when when you see something like, oh yeah, we're gonna, with these stretch goals for an extra, $5,000, and God, we've seen that. But yeah, for this, sort of smallerish cost, we're gonna launch on these 3 platforms simultaneously, and oh boy, should that be a red flag. Like, that is not just from a technical standpoint, but from an administrative standpoint.
Just logistics, right?
The logistics, just the logistics for me on volume with PC and console was overwhelming. I cannot imagine trying to do, PC, Sony, Microsoft, and, blessings upon you if, Nintendo is in there as well. And also you're making promises that, you might not even be able to keep, which is the other thing. Like, you have to have contacts at these different console manufacturers, and some console manufacturers, like Sony and Microsoft, are much easier than others. So yeah, it can be complicated in there. It's true, Mike.
No, it's just it was the best attempt in game dev history to not name a company who was challenging to get in touch with. The hardware platforms like Microsoft and Sony are very easy to get in touch with. That's good to know. Yeah, that's good to know.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging @MikeBithell or @Slawinski. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. And thank you again for all of the reader mail. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downin. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slawinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Display.